It is on. Okay, good. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Have attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. Those who are here, welcome. Those of you guys who are going to be watching later, welcome, belated. And those who are zooming in, welcome. Okay. Have your notes out. We're going to be continuing on with Mao's Great Proletariat Cultural Revolution and all that that entails. We'll wrap up the story of Mao and carry it on a little bit afterwards just to give you a context of kind of like what's taking place and bring it up into the future a little bit. Okay? Reminder to you, come around. Actually, this will be very, very helpful for folks to come around then tomorrow, whether you're always coming around like many of you guys are, or sometimes, because then you can physically have somebody like give you peer review on your IA. Okay? And when is your IA due? Final draft? Yep, 18th. Yeah, 18th. Printed?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I want to look at it. With an image on the front? I think most of you guys had images on the front of yours on the last go-around. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations, and you guys have come a long way and so forth. It's fascinating because I'm hearing like some of the juniors and some of them going, there's not enough words in a history IA to do everything you're supposed to do. I'm like, well, like somebody said like their first section was already getting close to 800 words. I'm like, well, you're just going to have to pare it down. Yeah, first paragraph might need to be smaller, and your OPVL on each of the different parts might need to be a little bit more, fine-tuned. Okay? Hopefully nobody feels like their reflection has to be like extensively beyond 400 words, and then the bulk of it. So anyway, I'll have lots of things to do over the break, reading your papers, looking forward to that. And we are continuing on. We're actually getting closer and closer to wrapping this one up, and then we're going to be getting into the last part of the Cold War, which is going to take us right up into next semester, which is fine because that unit actually traditionally goes a little bit into second semester. And then after that, we got genocide in the Balkans and genocide in Rwanda. Well, I mean, yeah. You're like, yay, that's the last unit? Yeah, that will be the last unit. And then when we get to that point, probably April-ish, we'll be doing lots and lots of calibrating with you guys, writing essays in class. Okay, does that sound good? Questions, concerns? You guys ready to go? All right, let's do this. Okay, let's do this. All right, where last we left off, Mao is in charge. Let's check this out. He's been in charge for a while, and he will be really until his last dying days. Although his last dying days extend out for quite a while. It's kind of like, who's in charge of the country when the person who's in charge is kind of slowly but surely losing his ability due to health implications and so forth. I mean, is that good in a country when it's run by one person and that person is really, really old? And not really like completely grasping everything that's going on? I mean, what would that be like? I mean, it's like in our country, we elect people. We're like, yeah, you can do this and so forth. And actually, we do have a provision. If somebody who was in the presidency actually got to a point, kind of like Woodrow Wilson, doing with him and with the 11th grade. He had a stroke in his second term. Right? And I mean, he was incapacitated. We didn't have it in the Constitution then, but what about now? If we have a president that's incapacitated because of something like that, who steps in as the acting president? Vice president, with an agreement by the vice president and a majority of the cabinet, the top executive secretaries of the different departments. So what about this guy? Lin Biao. During the Cultural Revolution, he was promoted to number 2. Liu Shaoxi got demoted. I mean, what ultimately happened to Liu Shaoxi? Yeah, he ultimately died in prison. Yeah, that was kind of, rip on Liu Shaoxi. Livy, did you watch it yet? No, you didn't watch it yet. Somebody can tell, Livy, what happened to Deng? Deng, what happened to Deng? Did he get demoted? Ashton, what happened to Deng? He got demoted. Yeah, McKinley's chiming in. She knows. I'm hearing a voice from over there. It's not Livy. He got demoted, and then, I mean, was he like demoted and like kicked out to the countryside? Yes, he was, yeah. So he'll still survive. Who, though, Melody, has really got it in, not only for Liu, which will happen, but also for Deng? Jiang Xing, yes. AKA, don't write it in any essays, but just so you help you remember, like, quote-unquote, Mrs. Mao. Yeah, so Mao's wife, who is a radical. Lin Biao is a radical. He gets up to the number 2 spot. Where did we leave him the last time we covered this? Julian, do you remember? Where was Lin Biao in that stage of our notes when we wrapped up last time?
Oh, you mean before that?
The end of our notes last time. Where was he? Yeah, he was. He was. He was dead. How did he die?
Pointed at the country to Mao.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, we got that part.
States and Soviet Union. He dies in an airplane crash.
How did that, and what's going on with the airplane crash?
1971.
Was it just sort of like this mysterious airplane crash? I want to kind of recap a little bit.
Oh, he was escaping.
Why was he trying to escape? I mean,
Yes, they were after him.
why? What, did he have an argument with Mao over something? Yes, he did. Make sure you have this. I want you to have this in your notes because this is very important. Okay? Lin Biao and Mao did not see eye to eye on a very important foreign policy issue. Okay? And it's always dangerous to not agree with Mao, even if like you agreed with Mao at the time that Mao expressed his point of view and then he changed his mind later and then now you're in big trouble. We've seen that happen before. Let 100 flowers bloom. Mao changed his mind. Okay? Cultural Revolution, go out and struggle with people. Oh, wait, the student leaders, now we're going to send dictatorship teams in and you'll be happy that the only real penalty you're going to have is you're going to be packed off into the countryside for who knows how many years. But Lin Biao has a disagreement with Mao at the same time. And actually, well, it actually does fit into the previous patterns because Mao kind of changes his mind. You ready? How is China been getting along with the United States since the existence of communist China? Good, middle, bad. Bad. Since the beginning of the People's Republic of China, the United States and the People's Republic of China, the communists, what side were they on the same side in the Korean War? Or was one of them neutral? No, we were killing each other in the Korean War. The United States was on the opposite side of North Korea and a lot of Chinese soldiers. Okay? So that relationship with the United States and communist China was never great throughout the 1950s. And as you get to the end of the 1960s, it's not so great either. It's going to start changing in late 1960s as you go into the 1970s, okay? And I want to make sure that you have a real clear understanding of this. Because, as we talked about a little bit moving forward, the relationship between the United States and China will improve. And that's going to be a result of the decisions of what two men primarily? Nixon, wow, we got the answer here, and here's an easy one. Who's going to make a decision for China's part? Mao, exactly. So it's Nixon and Mao that are going to agree that they're going to make things better. But now we get to the complicated question of the Soviet Union. Here's an easy one. Okay, Sage, at the beginning of communist China, how is the communist China getting along with the Soviet Union? Great. When do things start falling apart? Yeah. After Khrushchev starts coming in and you start getting into the late 50s, you get to the early 60s, and by the time you get to the end of the 1960s, here's the irony. China, write this down, Mao is seeing the Soviet Union as more and more of a threat. And this is the irony. If you're in the United States of America and you're looking over at what's going on over in Asia, and you're like, really? I'm not detecting the Soviet Union and China at odds with each other because it seems like they're both helping what country, Landon? What country are Communist China and the Soviet Union helping against the United States of America in the late 60s and going into the early 70s?
I want to say Israel, but that's a different thing.
In Asia. What country is the Soviet Union and the Communist China providing weapons for, and those weapons are being used to kill American soldiers? Vietnam, yeah, write it down. Vietnam. Vietnam, you're like, oh, I forgot Vietnam. Don't forget Vietnam. Vietnam is a Big deal for the United States of America as we go through the 1960s. Rodrigo was expecting you to chime in there, right? That's okay. I don't know. Somebody's got like their little art thing going on there and so forth. Anyway, so, I mean, actually, let me ask you, Rodrigo. Communist China supports North Vietnam? Soviet Union supports North Vietnam? Which of them has a closer relationship? Soviet Union. Make sure you have that in your notes. That's actually very critical. Soviet Union does. And I think I referred to earlier on, like during the Vietnam War, about how like the Soviets, sometimes they would send their supplies to North Vietnam through China by land, and other times they're like, no, we're not going to do that. Because the Chinese communists were peeling off some of those supplies and keeping it for themselves. So if the Soviets wanted to make sure that the North Vietnamese got all the weapons and supplies, they had to deliver it by air or by sea. Here's something I want you to add in, okay? Because this is going to be an important thing. China and Vietnam historically have been at odds. Write that down. Yeah, they've been adversaries. If you look at the big picture of Chinese history, there were times that China had tried to take over Vietnam and kind of like have a relationship with Vietnam like they did with Korea. Remember Korea? Korea had been sort of like a puppet of China, basically as long as Korea kept paying its lunch money year after year after year after year for almost 1,000 years, then Korea could be a separate independent country. Okay? Well, there were times in history where different Chinese, dynasties and so forth would try and take over Vietnam. They did not have as much success. I tell you what, the Vietnamese, they're pretty darn scrappy. We discovered that the hard way during the Vietnam War. China knows about Vietnam too. And Mao Zedong, seeing North Vietnam getting all this weapons and support and supplies from the Soviets, and they're concerned about the Soviets, that's not setting very well. How does China see Vietnam? Well, in the Vietnam War, they're sort of helping them out there. But it's also sort of like, well, when this war is over, they're going to go back into being a potentially adversarial relationship. But here's a surprise for you. Guess what? Guess who went to war at the end of the 1970s? China and communist Vietnam. Seriously. China, in the late 1970s, China invaded communist Vietnam. The people over in America going, what? I'm missing something here. I thought you guys were all communists and they're all on the same side. Well, if you look at the big picture of history, you'll see there's some tension there. There's some rivalries there. The Soviets had a much, much better relationship with the communists in Vietnam. And part of that was because of that opposite side thing. Oh, by the way, guess who won when China invaded Vietnam? Vietnam. It's kind of like, we can take on America, boom, and now we're going to take on China, boom. Actually, who's got a better relationship now in that part of the world? The United States and China or the United States and Vietnam? It's kind of weird. This is like right now. The communists are in charge of Vietnam and the communists are in charge of China. Well, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but China is trying to expand its control in the South China Sea. Some of you guys may be aware that like China is like literally building islands into the South China Sea. You're like, why would you build an island? Oh, that's right, you got territorial waters. So all the waters around your island are yours. And the Vietnamese are feeling threatened by that, as are the Taiwanese and the Filipinos and the Australians and everybody else in that region, because those were supposed to be international waters. So China is kind of fitting back into its mold of a big deal and potentially a threat to some of its neighbors there. Okay? Getting back to Lin Biao. Lin Biao sees the United States as the bigger threat. They've been to war with him. Mao starts seeing things differently. And when they get into a fight, they get into a disagreement, who wins? Mao does. And what happens to Lin Biao? He realizes he's on the losing end of an argument and tries to get out of the country. That's probably what happened. I always feel bad for the pilot. I mentioned this last time because the pilot ended up dead too, along with Lin Biao, as the plane went crashing down in Mongolia. 1971, September. This is an interesting thing, okay? Because we got the Cultural Revolution starting in 66. I mean, it was crazy for 2 years there, but it's still going on. When Lin Biao is out of the way, who is the most prominent kind of pro-cultural revolutionary figure still out there? Deng Xiaoping, very good. Okay? Things settle down a bit. But those radicals, Deng Xiaoping and others, are still part of the thing. Mao hasn't completely distanced themselves from him. They're not happy about the positive relationship that's starting to build between China and the United States, but they're kind of watching and seeing. You know, Liu Shaoxi is dead. Deng is, you know, like kicked out into the countryside. Zhou Enlai is one that they're keeping an eye on, but, you know, like, can Zhou forever, like, you know, remain free from having a struggle meeting in his face? Well, we'll come back to that in a moment. Here we go. Here's the big day, February 1972. February 1972, okay? By the way, and they do point this out, the fanaticism of the Cultural Revolution tends to kind of die down a little bit. So there's a sense that maybe it's almost like over. But it's not. Here we go. Who arrives in China February 1972? Nixon, very good. Wow, okay. I was pointing at Trenton, but Nixon, okay? And so he arrives, and that's just a really, really big thing. It's like this triangulation thing. Nixon's trying to put China off with the Soviet Union to put some more pressure on the Soviet Union, on arms control and the Vietnam War and so forth. I mean, it's very, very interesting and complicating. And does it work out well for Nixon? Yeah, I mean, it's seen as a foreign policy triumph. And he will coast into a huge victory when he runs for re-election in November of 1972. Right? And didn't he finish out a full, like, 4-year term, second term? No, why not?
Because he did naughty things.
He did? Watergate? They broke into the Democratic National Headquarters and, like, his campaign was seen to be involved? Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Well, yeah. I mean, so I come in. Hello? So anyway, here we go. So he comes there, and obviously Nixon wants there to be China to restrain or balance the Soviet Union and Vietnam and Mao's. Mao's interesting because Mao would say things, you can write this down. Mao would say to Nixon, this is going to be new for my people because we've been criticizing you over and over and over again. And we're going to still do that publicly. It's kind of weird. We'll still do that publicly occasionally about, you know, what you're doing. But just know, it's just for the public. We're trying to bring them on slowly to the fact that we have an improved relationship with the United States of America. I'm like, it's kind of, yeah, it is. The key thing there, though, write this down, 1972, it's called the Shanghai Communique. All right, so this is a document signed, an agreement, Shanghai Communique. It's written down in your handout, okay? And it is an agreement between the United States and China to move things forward in a positive way. The ultimate payoff is going to be an exchange of ambassadors, a recognition of China as the government for China. Now, there is one part that they don't completely agree on. Guess what one part that the two sides don't agree on? As far as territorial. Taiwan, very good. Write it down. Taiwan. They agree to disagree. But this is kind of significant because previously the United States, our official position was the government of China is the Republic of China government, which is located in Taiwan. When we give that up, we're basically saying, okay, you know, China, don't attack those guys there, but, for example, who gets the seat on the United Nations Security Council, one of the 5 seats with the veto power? People's Republic of China. Who is going to, as we go through the 70s and into the 80s, have more and more trade relations and so forth going on between the United States and Communist China? So that's going to be happening, all right? With respect to China itself, okay, after the in 1972, I believe it's 1972, 1973, Mao rehabilitates Deng Xiaoping. This is very important for internal Chinese politics. Deng Xiaoping is brought back from the countryside. It's kind of weird. Can you imagine like the, I want to say Christmas party, that wouldn't really be the case in China, but can you imagine some social gathering? It's like, there's Mao, there's his wife, there's Deng Xiaoping. Imagine the conversations like, hey, how are things out in the countryside, Deng? Says Jiang Sheng. thinking, uh-oh, he's back. My husband should never have brought him back. And Deng's like, oh, they were really peachy. Thinking, boy, Jiang Xing, if I could ever get my hands on you. Well, he will, all right? By the time we get to the last years of Mao Zedong, by 1974, he's weaker. He's only appearing in public very rarely. To see foreign leaders, you'll see an image of him in the video, meeting like the Philippine leader, Fernando Marcos. There's a question as to who's going to take over after Mao. Who will take over after Mao? As long as he's alive, he's in charge. Who's going to take over after Mao? Who actually hasn't been kicked out to the countryside? The idea is Zhou Enlai. Right? Zhou Enlai, write it down. Zhou Enlai is the one that is identified as being kind of sort of like next in line. Although there's a problem. Because Zhou Enlai's health is horrible. And he ultimately is going to die in 1976, January 8th. He's going to die before Mao dies. Zhou Enlai. But before Zhou Enlai gets to even approach the year 1976, guess who is going to organize an attack, a campaign against Zhou Enlai? Well, everything happens with Mao's permission, but guess who's going to be pushing it? Jiang Xing, very good. Jiang Xing is. Jiang Xing. And at this point, you can call them those people who are closest to her. There are three that are very close to her. It's going to be referred to, Jiang Xing, and those three are going to be referred to as the Gang of Four. Okay? I suppose that could either be positive or negative, depending on how you look at it. And they're going to be pushing this, and they're going to be pushing it eventually. Zhou Enlai will, he's got too much popularity built up, and they won't, struggle with him to death. Cancer is going to take its toll, and he will die January 8th, 1976. Now, this is very interesting. Watch how this plays out. Zhou Enlai dies with a lot of respect from Mao, from the Chinese people. He dies January 8th, 1976. They have a date in the spring. It's sort of like a remembrance date. It's like a memorial date where observations, wreaths are placed, on the memorials and grave sites to important people. And so they're actually going to be having, that spring, there will be gatherings and people will lay wreaths for Zhou Enlai at Tiananmen Square, the big open area in the heart of Beijing. Write this down. In spring in Tiananmen Square, those wreath-laying observances are going to turn into protests. They're going to be turning into protests. And the essence of the protest is they're going to be complaining about the radical nature of the Cultural Revolution. And they're going to be complaining about people like Jiang Xing. Let me see, what did Jiang Xing done recently to make Zhou Enlai's life difficult? Oh yeah, that's right, she organized a campaign against him. So now Jiang Xing is seeing this massive group. So in the spring of 1976, you get lots and lots of people that are hanging out in Tiananmen Square, and they're protesting against Jiang Xing. Yeah. And so it's kind of like, so here they are, and so Jiang Xing's like, I don't like how this is going. So she's going to be talking to her husband, Mao Zedong, and feeding him with information basically saying, these guys are, I don't know, what would get Mao to order the military and the police and so forth to crack these crowds up. Basically persuade him that this is anti-revolutionary, anti-communist or so forth. She does, and so he's like, yeah, clear them away. But this is interesting because the crowds in Tiananmen Square in 1976 are in favor of the dead Zhou Enlai, but they're also in favor of Deng Xiaoping because they want more moderation to be brought into China. This is really weird because move the clock forward. I think I mentioned this to you already. Move the clock forward to 1988. And when you have protests in Tiananmen Square, 1988, who's in charge of the country then? Deng Xiaoping. Does he see the crowds as being supportive of him, like they were in 1976? Or does he see the crowds as being against him? like they were during parts of the Cultural Revolution. Because that's going to make a big difference in how you see a crowd. When you see a crowd, do you see those people cheering you on, or do you see those people as being potentially threatening? Did he see them threatening in 1988? Yeah, and he had the army clear them out. Okay? Deng Xiaoping. Yeah, that was in 1988. Okay? 1988. I'm just kind of giving you a sense. It's kind of like, well, it's okay. Sorry. It's kind of like, when was the last time there was a big crowd of people in China having like week on after week on protest?
At least it's really good because we were like talking about how Joe and I died, and then everyone was ripping on Deng Xiaoping, and then you just were saying everybody was.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm trying to give you context. What? Okay, so let me throw this out to you. How many of you guys have heard of like the massive Tiananmen protests in 1988? No, really? I did. I told you guys last time about that. Yeah. And Deng Xiaoping is in charge, and he's like, I don't like this. Clear it away. Clear them away. Too much chaos. I don't like it when students protest. Sometimes he does. In 1976 he did, because they were like in favor of him. But the Cultural Revolution protests, he didn't like those. And then the ones in 1988, he didn't like those. All right? So here we go. In China, I'm not saying they're superstitious, but when big natural disasters occur, the Chinese people look at that as like, that's a sign that there's going to be a big change. There was a big, huge earthquake in July of 1976. Killed 400,000 people. You can write that down. That's a big one. I mean, that's like nature killing people. Massive earthquake. And people are looking around going, okay, there's going to be change. I'm like, hello. Anyone can look at Mao and go, this guy is not going to be around for very long. And he did die September 9th, 1976. 400,000, over 400,000 people died in the earthquake. You know, is that a sign? Is that portents that there is going to be Mao dying? Actually, you know what's portents of Mao dying? Check his pulse. I mean, look at the guy. He's not doing very well in the last few years of his life. He dies. All right? Now, I'll just throw this out to you guys. When Mao's gone, who's in charge? There was one guy that was ostensibly put in charge. Write his name down. Hua Guofeng. You've got it in the handout there. Do you see? Hua Guofeng. He was sort of set up as like, okay, he's going to take over Mao's place. Really? The guy has no deep loyalty among the Chinese population. September 9th, 1976. Okay? So Hua Guofeng is like the leader, but really there's a power struggle going behind the scenes. And guess who the two top leaders of the two different camps are for the power struggle? Jiang Xing and her gang of four, and who's on the other side? Deng Xiaoping. Very good. Who's going to win? Well, this picture will tell you who wins. Deng wins. You guys know this because I told you Deng is going to be in power. I've already tipped you off as to what's going to happen to Jiang Xing and her gang of four. Do you see? Can you identify which one's Jiang Xing in this Chinese anti-gang of four poster?
Maybe
Is it this one, the bald one? No. This one? No. She is a woman. It's Mao's wife. Widow. Is it here? It's this one. Yeah, she's got glasses and so forth. So what is the X? X marks the spot. There's a treasure there. What does the X marks this? What does X symbolize during the Cultural Revolution, during a struggle meeting? Someone's got an X on their sign that's hanging over their neck. Done for. Yeah, done for. She'll end up dying in prison, along with, I think the rest of them are going to be dying in prison and so forth. So Deng is going to ultimately take power. And what kinds of things is Deng going to institute? Is he going to free up elections? No. Free speech? No. Introduce capitalism?
Yeah, kind of.
All of a sudden or carefully?
Kind of all of a sudden, right?
Cross the river by feeling the stones. If you shut down one government-run factory and put people out of work, make sure there's another place for them to go work. Because otherwise you're going to have all kinds of dissatisfaction within the population and society. Does that make sense? Isn't this wild? Yeah. This Chinese history helps you to understand not only what was going on back then, but also give a sense of a context of what was going on in the current time period. Okay? All right.
It's very confusing.
But you know a little bit more now than you did before.
I know more, yes, but it's like the names and the chronology.
I know. We got so many presidents and so forth. Can't we just call them like by their numbers? I don't know. Does that make it easier? You got to learn it. Okay?
Generally, it would have been easier if we referred to them all as number 1, 2, and 3, or like their position numbers. Like, I'm being honest. It was so confusing because their names were so
You'll love the test that's coming up in this unit. Yeah, because when I do the matching, you know, it's just like, do I put like one Asian name mixed in with one South American name? No, I put like 5 Asian names, so you're going to need to know the difference. It's important. You just can't go, that Asian guy in charge of that Asian country that did that thing back then, some time ago. You guys ready for the video? I'm going to put the rest of it on here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this one off.